Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining this last session of the day before the 2026 My Dog is My Home conference concludes. I hope you all have enjoyed the conference and have been able to make some connections with your fellow attendees. As we look forward, I'm so excited to introduce this session on introducing the theory of change. My name is Vanessa Hidden, and I'm the program assistant for at My Dog is My Home. My work focuses on community building for systems change, which I do primarily through outreach, administration, and capacity building for the Co-Sheltering Collaborative and other programs at My Dog is My Home. I'm also a Master's of Public Health candidate at the Colorado School for Public Health, focusing my studies on One Health. I will be moderating your session today. Our speakers are Lina Cohen, Manager of People and Animals Living Safely, or PALS for All, at the Urban Resource Institute. Urban Resource Institute is a Manhattan-based nonprofit organization that offers services for survivors of domestic violence, the homeless, and adults who have been diagnosed with intellectual and developmental disabilities. Lina focuses their work on technical assistance and training other organizations on how to become pet inclusive. Sue O'Neill is a PhD candidate at the University of New Brunswick, focusing her dissertation research on help-seeking services for survivors of intimate partner violence, or IPV, and their companion animals. Sue volunteers as director for the Animal Welfare Foundation of Canada, an organization focused on advancing animal welfare in Canada. Sue also volunteers on the board of directors for Bryony House, a crisis IPV shelter located in Halifax, Nova Scotia. We're honored to have both of these individuals serving on the Co-Sheltering Collaborative Steering Committee as leaders of this work and drivers of a brand new theory of change. The Co-Sheltering Collaborative started as a project of My Dog is My Home 8 years ago. The idea was to use the model of collective impact to create systems change for co-sheltering across the country. Since then, My Dog is My Home and the collaborative have grown considerably, with new faces and fresh perspectives on the state of co-sheltering systems. Now, with international representation, the theory of change for the collaborative has an all-new update from a freshly established steering committee who is leading the way. Our speakers today collaborated on the development of this new strategy for creating systems change through shared goals, metrics, and a vision for the future of the co-sheltering collaborative. The strategic work in creating the visual framework to explain the how and the why of the collaborative's long-term goals has been many months in the making. So without further ado, I'm pleased to hand things off to Lina and Sue.
Hi everyone. So, like Vanessa said, my name is Lina Cohen, and I work in New York City. So, hi from New York City, the Bronx to be specific. And today we already had a really awesome meetup before this meeting, which was a little precursor to what we're going to be talking about today. And we do have about 30 minutes, and we want room for questions. So, we're both gonna probably be flying through this material. I'm sure that we could say a lot more. But the good news is, at the end of this presentation, we're going to be asking you to join us on this journey, and we'll have more time to hopefully meet in person, or not in person, online typically, because we're all over the country. But come join us. And Sue, if you could give me the next slide, please. So, like Vanessa said, the history of the Co-Sheltering Collaborative is that it was launched in 2018. Why? Because there was a problem that people were seeing that needed to be resolved and still needs to be resolved. And that's that people were facing housing insecurity with their pets and having nowhere to go. And they would have to give their pets up. They would have to make hard decisions. And we've seen, just from data that about half of people fleeing domestic violence do not flee immediately when they have pets with them because they're scared for their pets or they're scared they have to give them up. And so recognizing this data and seeing that this is a persistent problem in domestic violence and housing insecurity spaces, it was launched initially as a pilot and initially invitation only, to get small groups working on the problem together, to put our heads together. Because as somebody who does a lot of training in TA, I'm finding that folks end up in their own little silos, not realizing that they don't have to recreate the wheel, that other people have been doing this work previously, and that they can take lessons and they might be able to cherry pick lessons from different areas and different orgs to see what works for them. There is no like one size fits all solution for people and our organizations here. So one of the things that Co-Sheltering Club really focuses on is helping people figure out what works for themselves, for their orgs. We have people with lived experience on our teams, but we also have people working in animal welfare, human welfare, because this is a multi-pronged issue. And so eventually the co-sheltering collab really opened up to anybody who really cared about this. So we have people on our team who work as street vets. They're working with homeless folks who have pets. And are they necessarily doing sheltering work? No, but that medical intervention can be really essential to getting somebody into shelter or otherwise helping folks. So ultimately what we're doing is creating a space, and this is something that I'm really proud to be part of doing the work with My Dog is My Home. I think that My Dog is My Home is excellent at building bridges and opening space for people who are experts and not experts to come together because you don't have to be an expert to have good ideas here. And so people need to share their expertise, share their lived experiences because those voices are super essential. There are cracks in the system that we miss as people working in the field. And so hearing from people with lived experience is essential. And we strive to like share this and share generously because we're not here to hold all the answers or say that we are perfect and have the perfect solutions. This is to share and to ultimately help people. Next slide, please. And so this, now we shift to what the theory of change actually is. And if you're a person like me who is not the most processes minded person, perhaps like certain words like operationalize, theory of change might make you nervous, might make you scared. But all work that is done thoughtfully and that we sit down and consider our consider take all work that we take time to like consider how we're wording our issues, how we can be client-centered, trauma-informed. This is good work. And so a theory of change ultimately is just a framework to explain what our issue is that we're trying to solve and how we're going to do that. It's a long-term plan. And so it lays out the foundation for what we are trying to solve, which is that problem of housing insecurity for people with pets. And so we developed it in our steering committee meetings. It took weeks. Again, as a person who's not the most process focused, like coming up with definitions of terms and being really intentional with even the words that we're using to define these issues. Um, it it reminded me of how important it is to be so intentional with your work and be thoughtful with your work. So I'm glad to have been part of it. Um, and it's just the framework. So it's just the scaffolding that's holding up the work. Um, and what is coming next, is going to be really robust and further the foundation, build the building, basically. Next slide, please. And so, yeah, we're trying to focus on like a collective impact because, like I said, you see a lot of organizations that are kind of in their own silos, doing their own thing. And that's not a bad thing, but it's just we want to be able to collect all the work that people are doing and give people um, different information, knowledge, wisdom that we've gained along the way. Our five conditions of collective impact are having a common agenda, shared measurements. So being able to measure our success is also very vital because one person might say it's a success when it's not. Mutually reinforcing activities, continuous communication, and then backbone support, which again is the essential work that My Dog is My Home does in a lot of these spaces. Next slide. So here's our theory of change. Oh my God, that's so many words. There are arrows and circles. Oh my God, lots of color. Ultimately, this is such a like it's such a concise encapsulation of the work that we did. This is like months of work in one document. I'm going to focus really quickly on the problem, and then Sue's going to launch into the different areas that we're going to be focusing on. So the problem as we define it is the human-animal bond is a critical source of emotional and physical well-being, yet restrictive policies, lack of coordinated trauma-informed services, and systemic inequities create unnecessary barriers to pet inclusive housing and resources, resulting in forced separation, intensified trauma, and perpetual instability. So that is a really wordy but so thorough way of putting like this issue, because it focuses on the human animal bond and why that has value. It focuses on the housing insecurity of it all. But also like the lifelong instability. If you're unable to get that housing, what happens to you? You end up kind of stuck in the system. That sucks for everybody. It sucks like even on the governmental side, where resources could so much be focused on different things if we didn't have such a heavy issue of homelessness and domestic violence causing people to be homeless. And so now I'm gonna pass it on to Sue. Hope you have enough time to go over everything. Go ahead, Sue.
You did such a wonderful job. Thank you, Lina. So when we talk about the focus of the theory of change, we're talking about the people among whom we're going to focus our efforts and resources. And so these folks include housing providers, such as organizations, associations, and individual staff, homeless services, including shelters and hotlines, DV services like victim services, family justice centers and hotlines, human services staff like managers and social workers, policymakers and local government, donors and funders, public transportations, designers, architects, contractors, healthcare services like hospitals and EMS, animal services like animal control shelters, veterinarians, and animal welfare organizations, as well as disaster response organizations, pet food pantries, and community members at large, including voters. So really, there's lots of folks that we're really focusing on with our change. And so our organizational strategies within this theory of change are as follows. So we're going to increase buy-in from housing providers and other relevant organizations to adopt pet inclusive practices by 10% by December 31st, 2028. We're going to raise the average awareness of the human-animal bond 10% among shelters, housing providers, and other relevant organizations within collaborative memberships by December 31st, 2028. And by December 31st, 2028, we're going to raise awareness of the difference between pet inclusive and pet friendly among membership organizations by 25%. And then by January 1st, 2027, we will build an infrastructure within this collaborative to respond to advocacy opportunities. So you can tell these strategies, like they took us quite a long time, like Lina talked about, to come up with, but they really are, they're time bound, they're very specific. And so they help us see where we're going and sort of the roadmap of how we're going to get there. And so what is it going to look like when we get there? So our anticipated changes as a result of those strategies include trauma-informed systems and services, always including pets in the definition of family. Service design programs keeping whole families, including pets, together. Policies, programs, and spaces that are pet inclusive, not just pet friendly. And pet inclusive design is the standard, not the exception. Pets and their people can access the same services without barriers. From intake to sheltering, staff ask about pets and problem solve to support the entire family. So we really want you to come join us as we work towards making these changes that are so needed to be able to keep pets and people together. So who is our steering committee? Who worked on this theory of change? So we really collaborated on this together. And if you're wondering, what is the steering committee? The steering committee serves as a leadership body of this initiative, and we work really closely with the backbone of the organization. So My Dog is My Home, to set direction, uphold values, and ensure the collaborative's long-term success. And so you can see from these amazing logos here, the incredible organizations whose staff serve as members of the steering committee and help to create this theory of change. But the work of the Co-Sheltering Collaborative is not done just by the steering committee. It's not done alone. There are incredible working groups within the Co-Sheltering Collaborative that are also collaborating towards change. I'm going to say collaborating so much during this presentation. So there's the Racial Justice Working Group, which has been developed to advance racial justice and uphold the principles of diversity, equity, and inclusion. There's the Equitable Access to Care Working Group, which is meant for the various cross sections and access to care. So this group creates an informal meeting for discussions, resource sharing, as well as hosting presentations from group members on how they address disparities in access to care in their communities. And then we also have location-specific working groups that are working to increase co-sheltering within their communities. So these groups include Canada, which shout out to my Canadian folks, Cincinnati, New England, New York City, Los Angeles, and Seattle/Puget Sound. If you're interested in any of these working groups, you can go to the Co-Sheltering Club website to learn more about the group and also come join us in this work. So now we're so excited to tell you about a new working group that's coming soon. So the theory of change is going to have its own working group to work towards the anticipated changes that we talked about. We want you to join us. So more details will be shared at the Q2 meeting. So you definitely don't want to miss that. You can go to the QR code to register for the Q2 meeting. We would love to have you join us in this working group and be part of this exciting change. I encourage anyone who's even a tiny bit intrigued from this presentation to join us in that Q2 meeting to learn more. This is a wonderful opportunity to progress the work of co-sheltering, as particularly of the Co-Sheltering Collaborative, and improve access for people and pets across communities. And I hope I didn't take up too much time, but I think we're at the Q&A part.
Perfect. Perfect.
Thank you so much to both of you for going over that and giving us a really good overview of what the collaborative is and what this new theory of change is going to bring and how people can really get involved. We have a few really great questions that have come through the chat. I know we've talked a lot about our measures that we're going to use and some of the outcomes that we expect to see with that, but I wonder if you can discuss a little bit more about maybe for your region specifically, or for people in their local community, how they might be able to see indicators that co-sheltering systems are actually improving by them.
I'm happy to start off. So I can say anecdotally that things are changing a lot. I think that regionally, the things to find are to ask about it and to see how many opportunities you have to listen about it. And so when I started working at the Urban Resource Institute about 8 years ago. People did not understand why animals should even be included in sheltering. I got a lot of blank stares. I got a lot of "Ugh, animals" type of responses. And that has changed drastically in the last 8 years. Um, Even locally, I mean, I can speak a lot to like my local area, but our DHS, which is our department, it's a city government agency, the Department of Homeless Services. They're starting to open up to the idea of pets in shelter. It's going to be a long process. Government takes a while, but like their leadership seems interested, and that wasn't the case when I started for SIR. I think that like reaching out to your organizations that address homelessness and domestic violence and asking them if they know about the issue, what they know about the issue, and then encouraging them to join us on this journey. Tell them to come join the Co-Sheltering Club. Tell them to come to a regional working group. I co-lead the New York City regional working group. And it's a lot of fun. It's a positive space. Sue, do you have anything that you want to add?
You answer everything so perfectly. So not really, but I just want to say, I think that asking really shows that there's a need and there's an interest. And sometimes folks, who have pets don't think that they can ask for services that are inclusive of their pets. So if you're asking in your community, you're doing that advocacy work on the ground, that's really needed.
Thank you both so much for those really thoughtful answers. I think you bring up some really great points about what people can really do locally for them. Along this same line, that we've been talking about our metrics, we've been talking about different percentages. Can you discuss a little bit about where we got these numbers from when we were developing this, and give an understanding of what these percentage changes will represent in this theory of change?
I can lay some groundwork. I will need some help. And so I can tell you that when I started again, this is a lot of anecdotal, but when I started, it was less than 20% of shelters were pet friendly in any way. Um, Now I think that I believe that the number is around 20%, but I do think that there's a lot of work to be done with data collection. My organization is specifically trying to do some data collection just because the more data that we have, the easier it is for everybody to advocate for this stuff. But Sue, I saw you unmuted. Do you have more to say?
I was just gonna say when it comes to like the numbers that I was saying out loud of like the 10% and those sorts of things, really what that came down to was we had the wonderful Christine facilitating us in making SMART goals. So it really was what's achievable, what is measurable, and what's a reasonable measure within the time frame that we set. And so that was sort of the piece around, okay, we're saying for some cases, January 1st, 2027, for other cases, December 31st, 2028. What's a reasonable percentage for us to reach within that time frame? So that was part of those decisions too, of what do we think we can get to in that time frame.
Excellent responses. Thank you. Um, and again, just going on this similar, really talking about metrics and data that we're going to bring into this, are there any suggestions on the best ways to collect data to determine the community's need and ways to best meet those needs?
Okay. Repeat that question for me one more time, Vanessa. My brain.
No worries.
Yeah.
So this question is, do you have any suggestions on the best ways to collect data to determine the community's need and the ways to best meet those needs?
Yeah. I mean, I think that if you're collecting data, you're gonna want to focus on some stories. Stories really tell a more robust picture than just questionnaires alone. And so getting people with lived experience to tell you what they've been through, getting to hear where the gaps in services are. Like I can tell you with a lot of certainty that at least in the Northeast, there's barely any boarding and fostering available. And people who are housing insecure, that is something that they are asking for and looking for. You know what I mean? And I just know that from talking to folks and hearing that over and over again. I mean, what folks need is going to be a lot of practical stuff, shelter, support, supplies, um, and also like medical vet care, because it's not that affordable these days, unfortunately. And so those are like the very basic kind of foundational stuff, but look, asking and collecting that data is super helpful. If you have a data expert on your team, please get them to make some reports up and share with the world. We are all hungry for more information. My organization is working on a survey right now for the same reason. But yeah, I mean, focusing on those stories will give you the most information and taking the time to like reach out. I think the most challenging part is getting providers to sit down and talk and finding survivors who have the time and energy to talk. Because you have to be client centered and you have to be trauma informed when you're talking about this stuff. You're asking somebody about the most vulnerable points in their lives. And it sucks and it's hard. Um, and then what was the other thing I was going to say? There was something else I was going to say too. It's gone, but yeah. If Sue, if you have anything to add.
When I love that because the power of stories are so powerful, but I also love how you touched on the need for that to be a trauma-informed collection piece. The other thing I would just say is if you have a hotline where folks are calling for support, you can collect even that, basic data of how many folks calling you have a pet, but also the species of animal that they may be responsible for or have a relationship with. That can be really helpful for like proving to a board why you need to become a co-sheltering facility, or even proving to your community why co-sheltering is needed to be the focus of your community. And also you might find some interesting information about the species or the number of animals that you might anticipate being able to support. So that's the other piece.
Thank you both again. Again, great answers. Anybody who knows My Dog is My Home knows that we are huge proponents of storytelling. So I really appreciate the tap onto that because what better way to explain data and why it's important than through stories. So wonderful. The next question we have in chat is what everyday individuals can do to make an impact and to help to try and bring co-sheltering into their area. I think this is a really hot one. Who wants to take this one first?
I have so many. I have a list of 100 different things that you can do. But here's the most basic, simple thing that anyone with any level of experience can do is to support survivors and support the homeless. And when you have a friend who says that people shouldn't make a living wage, be like, nah, here's why. Because a lot of our people who with housing insecurity or in homeless shelter are people with jobs. Like they're people who are actually working. And even, you know, I don't need to get on my housing is a right box, but like I do believe that housing is a right and that people should have the right to those things. Um, I said this earlier in our previous meetup, but there's a lot of stigma and shame just around the topics of domestic violence and homelessness. And there's a lot of like, well, why did they stay in that dangerous situation? Why aren't they working more? Why aren't they doing XYZ? And shifting that conversation away from that and stopping the blame and the shame is like the first most essential, most vital thing. Because even getting funding in these fields is really hard because it is not a sexy topic and there's so much stigma around these topics and judgment around these topics and shame around these topics. People don't want to talk about it and people don't want to think about it if they don't have to. And then focusing on the human animal bond and explaining why animals are so therapeutic and so important and part of families. I personally am getting on this new kick of talking about getting rights for animals in a way, because, like, for example, in New York City, animals are seen as property, legally speaking, and so they don't have their own rights as like living, breathing creatures. I think that is starting to change as well. I am getting that feeling in the legal world, but encouraging those kind of things supporting elected officials or harassing your elected officials to change their minds and be better on these topics is really helpful. Again, I could tell you 100 million things. I do want to give Sue some time to talk because I think that you probably also have like 100 things to.
Everything that Lina said times two, like housing should be a human right, like all the things. And really, when it comes to that human animal bond, I think just reinforcing for folks that animals are family, and that we don't get to define who someone else defines as their family and their family composition. And services should be responsive to families as they are defined by the family, individually, not by how we decide because of our like heteronormative policies and all those sorts of things. So I really think recognizing that animals are family and really pushing that as something that you're advocating for with folks around you.
Thank you both. Mindset shifts are such a huge part of the work that individuals can do. So that those are great suggestions and great ideas for things that people should consider when they're going into this work, especially within their local community. As a last thing, our last couple of minutes here, I know there was a question about the link to the Q2 meeting, which has been dropped in chat, so please sign up for it there. But just, I want to address that you all did a really great job of explaining our working groups and our upcoming working groups for ways to get involved. But what are some other ways, including like this quarterly 2 meeting, and maybe if somebody's interested in joining the steering committee, you want to talk about that?
Yes. Um, okay. We need more people. We need more people to do this work, and we need more people to join us on the steering committee because the more diversity of voices that we have, the better. This is a field of shy introverts in a lot of ways. And so having more people with more opinions is really, really helpful. So that nobody feels too nervous to join. This morning we had some folks who were like, I'm not sure if I have the right amount of expertise. We don't need your expertise. We need your imagination and your curiosity and your good attitude more than anything. We are a very non-judgmental group. We are here to like listen to folks. And if you don't have to have lived experience, you don't have to work in the field. You can just be a person who's like smart and empathetic and be like, oh, have you ever thought of this? And would be like, oh my God, you just came up with a brilliant idea. So please join us. Like, no matter what your level, student, person with lived experience, professional animal welfare, professional in human services. And again, like even weird, like kind of out there things. Like we've had people, therapists. We need therapists to support people with their emotional support animal letters, and getting somebody in that field to help us out and get some more words out, because I've seen a lot of therapy things where they're not allowed, or it's writing those letters, there's some stigma there. Um, we have Project Street Vet join us in some of our calls. We have a lot of different places that they might not necessarily think that they're connected to the issue, but they still are.
We go further together. Everything that Lina said, like the more of you folks that join us, like the more diverse skills and expertise and talents and imagination, the further we're going to go. But also the quarterly meetings are just like the most joyful meeting of my calendar. So please come join us. There's always like a fireside chat. There's lots of engagement. There's chance to talk. It's just like, it's a meeting where you're going to learn, you're going to take something from it, and you're also going to feel like you can contribute. So please come join us at those meetings. Even if you're not ready to dive into the rest of the pool, just come join us, and we promise you'll really enjoy those quarterly meetings.
Thank you so much for all the great information you shared today. I know we're a minute over, so I'm going to let you all go so you can hop into our closing session. Thank you, and I'll see you at the collaborative. Chasing